What's up guys, back again with another commentary video. The main focus of this commentary video is going to be about manually piloting. This is something that I've had a lot of feedback in my comments on my raw footage when I post them. Lots of people are sort of inquiring about, how I'm making my movements, what I'm deciding, how I pilot my ship basically. And this video is chock full of examples of how I do that. And my goal for this video is to give all the information I can on manually piloting, and I hope this is useful to even new players that are looking to introduce manually piloting into their gameplay, and I hope it's also useful for experienced players that are looking to sort of master this and maybe even get a better conceptual understanding on it. And so in this video I'm going to be sharing with you everything I really think about manually piloting, and that really gets summed up into sort of three parts, or three core principles I think go into manually piloting. We'll discuss those right before the video. And secondly, I'm of course going to really dissect my gameplay, some recordings of mine too in particular, of me flying this Vedmak here. And in dissecting that, I hope I'm able to commentate and show you guys the applications of the principles that I outlined just before. So enough about the video in general. These recordings specifically are of me in a Vedmak, and I have a fleet mate here, as you can see, this pretty little cinematic footage that I've made for you all in a Draugr. Now, let's talk a bit about the Vedmak. Now, the Vedmak is a ship that I think is, I won't say weak, I'll say it's quite underestimated, or, slightly below the par of this sort of small gang meta in 2020, or really even for solo as well, especially for a kiting cruiser platform, as you see how I fly it here. Very strong brawler, I think. It ramps up damage much faster than Nikatursa, and like I said, is for the most part, I think its biggest advantage is that it's underestimated by so much of the community, and that was made apparent in sort of, how players, when players have access to things like Pyfa, they see how this ship fits in, they see its stats without having to go out and fly it themselves. Things are very different from what they were, so many years ago. And so we'll go ahead and visit Pyfa here in a second, and the Vedmak sort of has a very weird place in the Triglavian lineup. It's situated right in between the Kikimora and the Drekavac, kind of ignoring the Tech 2 cruiser, the Icky here. But just in the sort of destroyer, cruiser, and battle cruiser, those three ships together, it's outranged by both of them, it's outdamaged by both of them, and it really doesn't seem to have any clear distinct advantages other than it kind of gets fights because it's this underestimated ship. But I fight in this video just for the sake of that. I'm looking for something different, and I think it's quite strong to get that aggression. We talk a lot about that, and one of the ways I try and get aggression from players is it's kind of flying ships that aren't very scary, right? Ships that players are willing to engage. And so here right now, we'll take a look at my fit, and here it is. So I'll talk about very quickly about the few key points of this fit that I quite like. And the first thing you'll notice is that this thing has a plate. Now, we talk about, sort of kiting metas and the Vedmak and how it kites, and I think a gun that a lot of players are willing to jump to, or I should say jump to often, is that plates slow you down, and plates are bad. Now, I've almost on every armor kiting platform that I try and kite with nowadays, I really try and stick an 800 plate on there. And again, like I said, players are almost apprehensive to do this because they think, plates slow you down, you want nothing slowing down, you want to be as fast as possible when you kite. And the main advantage of this combination of the 800 plate and the medium ansil, in addition to the Vedmak's already quite strong base armor HP, is that you're able to withstand and really get these rep cycles off. You're able to bleed damage in between these reps and still be okay. So in a sense, you're able to trade damage with a lot of ships, and the first thing that comes to mind is definitely rapid light ships. These ships are almost always sort of quantified in sort of a clip potential, like things like Caracals have anywhere from 16 to 18, and then Serbs and Orthuses have close to 20 or 22,000 EH, like raw damage out of one clip of rapid lights. And these are incredibly strong burst platforms of damage, and this plate here, if you're able to sort of create a 1v1 with these ships on a grid, like many of the Nospreys you'll see in this fight, you're able to withstand that clip damage, and you're able to out-trade, and especially considering the Vedmak's ramping damage, in addition to the newts it has, you're newting off hardeners, you're newting off active tank. While you withstand that clip damage specifically, or any sort of large amount of burst damage, you're able to trade essentially with your ramping mystic damage or occult damage if you use it. And so this is what I love about this fit, is that it's very tanky. It can take a huge beating, and it can trade cruisers, especially kitey cruisers that are, somewhat, not as tanky as you are. And you can see here that, you have 17,000 hit points just in armor, and 16 on top of that. And so that's over 30 KEHP just in armor alone. So this is a very tanky armor fit, and you're also incredibly fast. You have this, you have the nice projected ability. I spring for a B-type neutralizer on here because the 15 kilometer optimal is really crazy. You shut down things like interceptors that are coming into your range, even at the edge of fall off. Even if you're needing for, let's see here, it's 180 gigajoules, right? 90 gigajoules on an interceptor after it's running its micro warp drive velocity is quite a bit, and that's at 22 kilometers, right? You're putting that much neutralization on a scepter that could shut off their micro warp drive. From that moment, 22 kilometers to 11, 13 kilometers or overheated scram range, their micro warp drive might shut off, and you have this nice little web, at least I fit here, for 18 kilometer web range, and that's also quite nice to keep things at bay. The Vedmak is also incredibly fast, and even if that stuff gets on you, you have these two small neutralizers that I use in conjunction with this nice little neutralization capacitor need bonus, the activation cost. So very slippery ship with regards to anti-tackle, and the tracking bonus makes it even more resilient. I fit the cat battery here for a bit of laziness almost. I like to simplify things. I don't really like a whole lot of player input. I could definitely increase player input a bit, but this is just my preference. It keeps things nice and simple, and you'll see that to effect here in this video. I am running some implants here, some rate of fire implants to help me ramp a little faster. I do run in this video some standard Frentics to give me a little bit extra range, which really helps in a Vedmak 1v1, ironically enough, in this video. I also take damage drugs, and about the drum bay, I like to carry some it has a 50 meter drum bay, so I like to carry a flight of big Vespas, or the medium or Vespa ECs. So, and probably one of my favorite applications of the drone bay and these Vespas in particular is if ever I see a battle cruiser on a gate, I'm really able to brawl it and sort of have that better chance to jam than EC 300s. You get to use those Vespas and ramp occult on things, get them aggressed on gates, and not be too worried. It is a risk, of course, but it's one that's very fun to take. And I also keep acolytes here. I like running acolytes over warriors because I don't have any smart bombs on this fit, and so acolytes deal with ECs quite well. So I choose to do that. So now we can move on over to the recordings. And this is the part where I promised you all where I would talk about manually piloting and those 3 core principles that I think go into manually piloting. And like I said before, I hope this is useful to new players that are looking to introduce this into their gameplay, as well as experienced players that are looking to sort of master this and sort of heighten their gameplay in a sense. So the 3 things that I find integral to manually piloting are, for one, the first thing on my list is spatial awareness. In a sense, in all of these videos, I essentially reduce ships in space to points in space, because that's really what the game does, in a sense. You have a point in space, and you just have the ship model, but the ship models, the guns, are completely inconsequential. And when you imagine these ships as points in space, for the more geometrically inclined, or if you can imagine, like I do, grids, you can sort of, create lines in between these points, right? You can see perhaps shapes, or you can conceptualize the grid in a way that allows you to sort of expand upon the points in space. And if you think about it a little bit more geometric, from a geometric standpoint, you can start to see patterns, right, in this. And in sort of conceptualizing grids this way and having that spatial awareness and knowing where ships are, and not only where ships are, but what each ship does specifically. These ships have ranges, right? Caracals have ranges here. Vedmaks have ranges. Different ships have different ranges and different properties, and you of course have a distance from yourself and them, and so this is just heightening this level of complexity with spatial awareness. But knowing where your ship is and where opponent ships are is probably the most crucial step to manually piloting effectively. And so one of the things I do for my gameplay is I have all my ship brackets in space, both fleet members and opponent ships, and this allows me to have sort of that spatial awareness and situational awareness. Not quite so much situational, but really spatial awareness. I get to see where things are. I don't have to consult my overview and see what cruiser is this, what battle cruiser is this. It's on the screen. I get to read it, and in doing that I can consult, and I know from previous fights, I know from Python knowledge, I know you can apply your in-game experience to knowing what these ships do and knowing their ranges. And so with that being said, you can sort of take these points and you can apply ranges to them, right? Oh, there's like a 60-kilometer bubble around, this Osprey Navy issue where you can shoot me, right? Or say it's a Drekavac. Especially Triglavian ships are quite potent with their ramping abilities, so if a Drekavac can ramp on you at 40 kilometers, you can break ramp at 40, right? And that's the distance to sort of stay at. Without rambling too much on this, the second sort of plays into sort of spatial awareness, and it's sort of the next step into formulating how exactly you manually pilot it, and that is what I like to call line conceptualization. Now, the term line in this sense means the path you take through space, in sort of an metaphorically, or kind of an analogy really, is between racing, like car racing. If you're familiar with that, race cars take lines around corners, and there's an optimal path for cars to take around corners, or even in and out of opponents on a track, to give them the outcome that they want, right? Perhaps they want to tail someone, or to draft on another driver, or perhaps they want to overtake another driver. There's so many different outcomes that drivers would like, and there are different lines to achieve that in a race, and the corners are different as well. So this is what I mean when I mean line conceptualization. It's the path you take through space. And this sort of tags along to this spatial awareness and knowing where ships are and what they can do, because knowing what ships can do and their ranges and what threats, if they are to you, mean, where do you go, right? Do you go around this way? Do you go around this way? Do you go through this ship? Is this ship likely to have a scram? There's so many different factors that you have to consider, and this just adds to the complexity of, the amazing game that we play, right? So you combine all this knowledge of ships, offensive ranges, perhaps their E-war. You have sort of your meta knowledge of how ships are typically fit, and you combine all of this, and then it's even more complex when you consider, okay, I have this much HP, how much HP can I trade with this in order to, what do I get out of it, right? So there's this outcome that you want. And I talk about this a bit in my previous videos. You always talk about where your ship is and where you want to be, and this is that exact principle. It's line conceptualization, sort of where your ship is, right? That sort of tags along with spatial awareness. And where do you want to be? You should be planning. You should be anticipating where ships are going to be, if you anticipate them to change direction or change position. And you should also anticipate for yourself where you should be after that, right? Or during that, and how you're going to get there. And so that brings me to my third point, which is camera work. Now, camera work is really the driving motive force behind manually piloting. It's, in essence, how exactly you double-click in space, right? You have to orient your camera and align those double-clicks in the direction you want them to get the outcome you want, right? And so on this final note, this camera work, you pivot your camera this way, up and down, and there are a few little quirky key features about the camera that I touch on my other commentary videos, and that's the camera rotates on a vertical axis, up and down. Its axis, you can rotate around that axis 360 degrees. But one thing that's quite interesting is that you can't go 360 degrees across any of the horizontal axes, right? So you can't, because you'd be upside down on the other side. You'll know that the camera, it stops at the top and you have to switch and then go back down. Similarly, you can go east forever on a globe, right? And you can go west forever. You always keep going west. However, if you go north, eventually you'll go south. And so in a sense, that's my analogy for how the camera works in EVE Online. So it's really the same way. And because of this, there are a few little, it takes some getting used to. You pivot the camera, you orient it this way. It's a lot of fast clicking work. And my best advice to get better at this is really just to practice. You practice aligning your camera, pivoting your camera to where you need to do it. Zooming in and out is something I do a lot of in my videos. Practice with all of this mechanically with your mouse, right? That's the motive force behind all of this. You're clicking in space and whatnot. Get some practice with it, because that's really how you're going to get better at this third step, which is, like I mentioned, the motive force behind manually piloting. You'll see I do a lot of in this video. So now, having said that, we've looked at these three sort of core principles. Let's go ahead and start this recording. And this recording begins in Ethereum Reach after we garner quite a big response from members of Slice. And I'm going to pause the video quite frequently in this to sort of explain to you what I'm thinking about, because things change so quickly, and I'm sorry for viewers that this is sort of, very, I'm not sure, it's kind of rough, right? It's abrupt to stop like this in the video, and it sort of disrupts the flow. But there's so many details here that I'd like to share with you guys, and I can already tell this is going to be a very, very long video. I'm sorry for that, but like I said, there's so much to share, now that we've started the fight, I'll sort of explain to you what I'm thinking about just as the recording starts. So we have this huge, I won't say huge, but we have quite a few many different ships sort of burning at us, and extension is a technique that I use to just sort of, it's really just burning in a straight line away and sort of keeping people interested. One of the things I do here is that you'll see that I am double-clicked off to the side. I'm not burning straight away, and I double-click back this other way, and I start ramping on this Vedmak here. Now, if we consider for a moment, right, this first concept of manually piloting is this sort of spatial awareness concept or principle that I brought up previously. I'm sort of imagining all of these ships here, the Vedmak, the Osprey, this other Osprey, and this Caracal, at least the four that are the furthest out to me, to be points, right? And if we think about for a second the average plane or the average line that connects all of these, or the average line between all of these points, and we sort of, with that line, we extend out a plane, or that line exists on a plane, that's the plane that I want to pilot on, because it gets me the furthest away, it gets me the closest to the closest thing that I'm closest to, but the furthest away from the next furthest thing, if that makes sense. And so here you can see that I'm ramping on this Vedmak, and I double click, here I pivot, right? Some camera work here, I'm pivoting my camera, I double click to the side, I pivot my camera once again, and I pivot again to the other side. And so here is a good point that I raise, and I sort of talk about in other videos. I call this S-curving, because if you were to trace my path through space, right, my line, that concept of manually piloting, my ship sort of makes an S in space on this plane, or inscribed in this plane, if you were to imagine so. So these S-curves are important because you essentially bleed velocity. Now, you don't bleed velocity in a sense as that I'm always going to be quite faster than this Vedmak, but for those of you that are perhaps familiar with the physics concept of displacement, you can see that the longer distance I travel, the longer distance I travel, even though I'm faster than the Vedmak, my displacement is longer, my velocity is longer, so my displacement is longer, but the time is for the most part the same, and that gives me a lower velocity, relative to this Vedmak. And in a sense, if we consider only the component of my velocity that is parallel to that of the Vedmak, it's going to be similar as well. Traveling in these lines at an angle, I'm able to I give myself a component of velocity that's not parallel with the Vedmak, and so if you do some trig or whatever, you'd find that my velocity that's parallel with the Vedmak is quite close, and that's what I'm doing. Essentially, the key concept to take away from this, I should say, is that of you're trying to match radial velocity, and radial velocity is somewhat of a misnomer in EVE Online. I can get into that in a completely separate video, which I won't take 20 minutes to explain that right now. But radial velocity is essentially the net velocity between yourself and your opponent. So in this case, I want to maintain the current range that I'm at on this Vedmak. It's a bit close, but I'm okay with it. I'm confident that I can out-trade this Vedmak because I have a plate and he likely doesn't. Lots of Vedmaks just fit AARs, and like I mentioned previously, players are somewhat apprehensive to fit these 800 plates. So I'm confident that in a 1v1 with this Vedmak, I can win a Mystic battle with him, even considering my damage. Advantage with implants and drugs, and of course especially with my plate. So having said that, I don't want the range to change between myself and this Vedmak. I'm comfortable where it is and I want to maintain that, and so that's what these double clicks have done here. But you can see the Vedmak starts to go with this other group, these two groups of, I should say this one group of two Ospreys that are chasing my Draugr friend, and I have to pivot my camera of course and align my vector with his, and I begin to go towards the sun and burn with this Vedmak here. Now once my Draugr warps off, here let's consider for a moment we have this group of Ospreys up here. I'm still ramping on the Vedmak, I can't switch to anything. It's not in my interest to do so and lose this ramped damage that I've achieved with the Disintegrator. But now this camera angle provides a very good point of view and perspective of what I'm thinking and how I'm conceptualizing this grid, right? That's our first sort of core concept, is conceptualization and spatial awareness. And so we have this group of Ospreys over here. We also have the Hyperion and the Drekavac that are a bit farther, but you can see here if we reduce this grid into just points, we have this group, this cluster over here, let's consider that to be one. We have the Vedmak, which is my target, which is another, and we have the Ospreys over here that are another. And so if we consider this to be, let's just take for a second, right, if we just draw lines in between these two groups, right, towards the Vedmak, we have this one over here and we have this one over here, and this sort of makes sort of a triangle or a point. And so if I want to be the closest to the Vedmak but the furthest from each of these two groups, then the point that I need to be is somewhere down here, right? And so that's that sort of concept I've touched on, you know, where you are and where you need to be. And so right now I'm below this Vedmak, but I want to be a little bit further, and so the place where I want to be, if this Vedmak keeps chasing me, is somewhere down here. And it won't be straight down because this I have a bit of distance to I can get closer to the Drekavac. He's only 50 from me, and the Hyperion as well. I'm really much more scared of these Ospreys over here because I'm confident that I can take 2 clips of rapid light damage, but I'm sorry, only 1 clip of rapid light damage, but certainly not 2. And especially in addition to this Vedmak's ramp damage and some light drone damage, it can definitely push the limits of my tank. And so you'll see here I pilot down here, I pilot towards this group over here a little bit, and this is interesting as well. If we consider for a moment that line, right, of where my ship is and where I need to be, right, which was just here, and where I need to be is down here, we can apply the sort of same sort of geometric, I don't know, line conceptualization that we did just previously. And if we take this line and we imagine the plane that this line rests on, you can see that I now pilot on this plane, and so my camera pivots, my double click, this line here registers over this way, and if I'm correct, another double click is going to register somewhere over here, and you can see that I'm now accomplishing this S-curve in a completely different plane, right? The plane that's vertical, I guess you could say, to my tactical overlay. But this is where some really interesting sort of and something I think I missed just before is that that 18-kilometer web keeps you nice and safe from this Vedmak. If you can spend the extra ISK on, you know, faction webs and things, I'd really recommend it because it keeps you quite safe from really aggressive ships, and it's a really good element of control. But that aside, you can see here I'm accomplishing this S-curve in a completely different plane. And oh, here's where I get the web on the Vedmak here, and you know, my camera pivots, right? You can see here, that's, you know, these are all little details that are somewhat easy to miss. But one thing in the back of my mind that I'm thinking at this moment is that these Ospreys are much faster than this Vedmak. And so there is going to come a point very soon where these Ospreys are now in front of or between myself and the Vedmak. And so at this moment that I've paused the video, the point that I need to be is somewhere over here where my mouse is. You know, I want to be the furthest from the Ospreys, but I want to be the closest to the Vedmak because I want to ensure the kill. But these Ospreys most certainly have webs, as most Ospreys do. That's some sort of meta knowledge that you can have in your back pocket in these sort of fights when you're considering what to do. and I can't, I'm not really resilient against two webs. I won't be able to break it. I certainly won't be able to solo break these ospreys, because they most of the time fit rapid lights and XLASBs and LSEs, and that's you know, almost 40k EHP I have to go through. Can't do it. So I have to prepare for these ospreys to be in between myself and the Vedmak. And so as these ospreys come in, I have to now imagine, or I think for a moment, once these ospreys get on top of the Vedmak, I can be anywhere around the Vedmak. But the thing is the ospreys aren't going to stay there. They're going to keep coming towards me. And so I go off to the side a bit here, and you'll watch that the ospreys are clearly approaching me. And once they go around to the side of this Vedmak, you can see here now, right? Now where I am isn't where I need to be. If I want to be the closest to the Vedmak but furthest from the ospreys, there's a point that's collinear with these two things, and that's somewhere off in the distance, almost where my cursor is in game in the recording. And you can see that's where my ship travels. And so I heat my micro warp drive here, so that this is sort of that line conceptualization, right? I have a much longer distance to cover if I want to stay clear of these ospreys. And so in order to cover that distance faster, I heat my micro warp drive. Makes sense, right? And so here you can see I'm swinging out. I swung out sort of to begin with at the first part of the video when the ospreys were behind the Vedmak, because I wanted to know where they were going to be. Had I just chosen a direction or waited till the ospreys were on top of the Vedmak, they would have a shorter distance to cover to sort of to approach me and get a web on me if they wanted to. So having said that, going off to the side a bit and leading them over there before I swooped in like this allowed me to predict with certainty where the ospreys were and where that sort of optimal position was going to be. And so now that I'm heating my micro warp drive, I'm heating my tank, I'm staying in range here. This is where the Frentix is quite helpful. This is where things are looking good. I've totally escaped these ospreys here. They're chasing me. I'm faster than them. I've kept my ramp on the Vedmak, and the Vedmak, you know, isn't able to. I think he might be applying to me here. I'm not sure, but he's burning even with me towards the sun. And you can see there's this huge group of players. I'm bleeding armor. This is keeping them aggressive, and the ramp damage of the Vedmak really shining here. I finished the Vedmak. And I think I missed something here that's a good point. Let's see. Let me go back for a moment. So I get out of this sort of maneuver, right? This line, and now let's consider for a third moment the ships we have here. We have 3 ospreys. We have a Drekavac and a Vedmak here, and the Vedmak is this sort of target of opportunity that I'm interested in killing. And so if we want to imagine again for a second that there's this point here, the Vedmak, and then the furthest point away from all of these things is, again, we have this osprey up here, we have these 2 ospreys down here. I want to be furthest from both of these things, but both of these 2 groups, but closest to the Vedmak. And so that's going to be somewhere in the center, you know, along over here towards the sun. You know, these 2 groups make sort of a triangle. And now that I have this line, right, that sort of represents the place where I could be furthest from these 2 groups but closest to the Vedmak, I just sort of spiral around that a bit. And you can see here I sort of wrap around. I'm going over the top of that line, really sort of kind of on it. And I'll double click over here once the Vedmak dies, because my tank is running out. I'm running low on cap. And here you can see here the nice speed to the Vedmak and implants going to work. And I'm able to outrun these ospreys here, as this osprey loses point at around 28 as I expect. But this 800 plate, again, really shining, and you're able to have this sort of buffer that affords you the ability to take increased amount of damage that your AAR can't tank on its own, but you're able to withstand that damage, and it buys you time to do things like heat your micro warp drive out of 3 osprey clips, right? So that plate is very strong on things like even Omen Navy issues, on Zealots, on Vedmaks, on Demoses, on Munins, on, oh my goodness, there's so many different things, on Augur Navies, right? They have a HP bonus, even though they're not quite so popular. Those kind of, any armor kiting ship, don't be afraid to put those 800 plates on, because you can see here that the damage you're able to soak up is very nice indeed. So this was this first clip that I'm going to show you. This is the most intricate of the ones I have to show you. And the second clip is a little bit more mild, but I'd really like to show it to you guys anyway. So here we are again. My Draugr friend and I find this Caracal and Drekavac that are chasing us around a gate. They aggress us, they put their drones out, and this Drekavac is quick to engage, and this Caracal, I take some damage to sort of bait this Caracal into aggressing, and the Caracal aggresses, well, not so much aggresses, but he burns off the gate, right? And so we can again consider, you know, if I want to be the closest to the Caracal but furthest from the Drekavac, the point that exists that is collinear between these two ships, right? And that's out here somewhere where my cursor is, and that's where I begin to fly. That's where I begin to fly here with my Vedmak. And some really sort of basic kiting, I suppose. I say basic, but again, these S-curves, right? I'm pivoting my camera back one way and back the other to sort of bleed speed. I want to stay in range of the Caracal, right? I want to be in sort of range with my newt to newt off any harders. These, Caracals, they expend a lot of cap, and their regen isn't very good either. So when they fit micro warp drives, they fit invulns, they fit long points, they're expending a lot of cap. And so you may think that a medium newt doesn't do a whole lot to a cruiser, but it really does. So I get some links from my Draugr which are very, very helpful, right? These rapid deployment links and armor links, as you saw in the last one, just really making my tank shine and really making the Vedmak even faster. Allow me to play much more aggressively and take lines much more much more quickly, or I get to take even longer distances going so fast, or I get to be even more aggressive and trade HP, as we talked about previously in the video, with additional resists and EHP from the Draugr's armor energizing and rapid deployment. That's a little bit of an aside. However, the grid changes here when a second Caracal jumps in and a Saber comes in. And the Saber is sort of it's a fast tackling ship. It's clearly approaching me. And so now that this Drekavac has come past this Caracal, now the optimal position for my ship to kill this Caracal, to be furthest from the Drekavac but closest to the Caracal, exists somewhere over here. But unfortunately there's a Saber in my way. So the Saber bubbles here, and I decided to go below the Caracal and the Saber, since I don't know, I sort of have a preference. It might have been better, there might have been extra distance for me to have above the Caracal, but in a ship like the Vedmak, especially with my ranged web, I think I was comfortable in choosing my preference of going below and piloting below players, since I have this ranged web to keep me safe from the Saber. I also have a medium newt and light drones as well, and so I decided to keep my ramp on this Caracal here. The tracking bonus, incredible for tracking cruisers, even ones that are prop off here, able to track them very nicely. And the Saber keeps approaching me as well, so I decide to ramp on him next. And you can see here I'm a little bit less conservative with my plane, because I'm quite confident that with a web, with a newt, I'm able to control this Saber without a doubt. I can get scrammed by this Saber, and I have no doubts in my mind that he will die. So in order to keep him, since he's more agile than me and can sort of escape me if he wants to, or plays a little bit better, I decide to play very aggressively and let him get a little bit closer, and you can see here that sort of secures the kill for myself here. And so this Saber dies, bubbles the pod bubbles his own pod for me quite nicely, and we can see the Drekavac and this other Caracal coming out here. And so before, perhaps in the video that I didn't commentate on, the Drekavac has bursted armor links, and for me that was a dead giveaway that this is a very tanky Drekavac, right? Active armor, quite a popular fit. Drekavacs are either double skirmish link or double armor link, right? Very brawly ships with that resist bonus. So I'm not really interested in trying to crack this Drekavac, since if there's a Caracal on Greg that I can kill, and so I quickly burn over there. I get a heated cycle with those rapid deployment links for just a second, and I burn over to this Caracal, which is very isolated. I burn my battery here, which was a I don't know, you could call it a misplay. However, I felt too many times have ships sort of escape me if I didn't heat, so I'd much rather heat the cycle of MWD and burn a cap battery than lose the kill. I think that I expect this to be the last kill that we get of the night. So just some heating there, and sort of, I don't know, it was worth it. It was a trade-off, burning the battery, burning some mods, or securing this kill. I'm on top of this caracal with my medium newt, turning off some harders here, and occulting this. I don't have a damage advantage against a caracal at range. I'm gonna trade better with him if I can with occult, so I choose to do so there. And we sort of play around with this Drekavac here. I have no cap, and I'm in no position to stay on grid, especially with a Drekavac that out damages me. So this really wraps up my 2 clubs for you all. And so hopefully in this video, hopefully I accomplished my goal. I wanted to share with you guys what I think to be the 3 core principles of manually piloting are, and I really hope that you guys thought I did a very good job of dissecting my gameplay in this video and showing you guys some application of those 3 core concepts. And so that wraps up this video. Sorry to keep you guys so long, but this is, like I said, I really enjoyed making this recording. Manually piloting has been on my long list of things to do, and this is a commentary that really highlights that. I may even do a standalone video on it and show sort of all of the sort of things I do for manually piloting. But when you come to practice manually piloting more and more and more, you'll see that so many fights are alike in the sense that you use the same tools and the same patterns and the same techniques, and really that's all manually piloting is. It's, you know, camera work patterns, it's muscle memory, and you're able to apply this muscle memory to a wide variety of fights. And once you master it and get that practice down, it's a very, very, very useful tool in your tool belt for sort of small gang and sort of elevated gameplay. It allows you to pull off these plays that I did in this video and sort of get the outcomes that you want that are a bit more complex and less straightforward than, I don't know, other fights you may have had in the past. But so hopefully, like I said, I've accomplished my goal. If you guys liked this video, enjoyed it, thought it was helpful, let me know in the comments. I love getting feedback from you guys, and it means a lot that people can take, a few minutes out of their day after watching the video, a long one such as this one, and let me know how I'm doing, if you guys like the video or not. So without keeping you any longer, thank you everyone for watching. Like if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time.